My son came home from baseball practice with a black eye, a souvenir from his coach. When I called the coach, he laughed and asked, "What are you going to do about it? You Cetra nobody." He was right about one thing. I was just one dad, but I couldn't let it go. I spent the whole night on the phone. The next day, when that coach walked onto the field, "Before we get there, tell me, what city are you watching from today? And don't forget to subscribe for our daily stories." Okay, back to the field. Since my wife passed a few years earlier, my life had settled into a quiet, sometimes lonely routine centered on two things: the auto body shop where I worked and my son Jake. He was 12, a gentle, quiet kid with a huge heart and the center of my universe. His whole world, honestly, revolved around baseball. He lived and breathed it, so by extension, I did too. The town team, the Hornets, was practically sacred here. Their head coach, a man named Evans, was celebrated, a tough, old-school take-no-prisoners type who won championships. Because of that success, most parents overlooked his methods: the shouting until boys near tears, the punishing military-style drills. They called it character building. I always thought it was bullying, but Jake loved the game and the team, so I kept quiet. I was a single dad, a mechanic, not the parent who made waves. That Tuesday, Jake came home late from practice. I was in the kitchen making his favorite dinner when the front door clicked shut. "Jake?" I called. No answer. A cold knot of dread tightened in my stomach. In the living room, he stood with his head down, cap pulled low. "Hey," he mumbled, trying to slip past me to his room. "Whoa there, champ," I said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Let me see your face." He kept his head down. "I sit's fine, Dad. Just tired." "Jake," I said, firmer now, "look at me." Reluctantly, he raised his head, and my world went red. A dark, ugly bruise bloomed around his left eye. His lip was split, and a thin line of dried blood marked the corner of his mouth. "What happened?" I asked, my voice low and unfamiliar to me. "It sets nothing," he whispered, eyes full of a shame no child should bear. "I fell in the dugout." "Don't set lie to me," I said quietly, but with steel. "Tell me now." Then he told me. Through a crushed, tearful rush, they'd been doing a fielding drill. He missed an easy pop fly. The ball popped out of his glove. Coach Evans exploded. He stormed over, screamed at Jake, called him worthless and pathetic, grabbed the front of his jersey and shoved him hard. Jake stumbled, tripped over a bench and hit his face on the packed dirt of the dugout. The other kids just watched. Jake sobbed. He was so embarrassed. He said, "Please, Dad," he begged. "Don't say anything. He'll kick me off the team. He'll tell everyone I'm a baby. Please, just let it go." I held him. I held my brave, terrified son until his sobs eased. I gave him an ice pack, fed him dinner, and put him to bed. Then I sat alone in the dark living room, the TV casting a pale glow I wasn't watching. My mind was a storm, a father's raw, protective fury. The image of Jake's bruised face burned into me. A line had been crossed. His plea not to act was the plea of a frightened child. My responsibility wasn't to protect him from consequences, but to stand up for him when he was too scared to do it himself. My hand shook as I opened the team contact list and hit Coach Evans' number before doubt could stop me. He answered on the fourth ring with a bored, irritated bark. "Yeah, what is this?" he snapped. "Coach Evans?" "This is Thomas Riley, Jake Sepp's dad," I said. "My son came home with a black eye and a split lip. I want an explanation." Once. There was a pause. Then he laughed. Short, sharp, and condescending. The laugh of a man certain of his power. "An explanation," he sneered. "Your kid Sepp soft. He missed a pop fly a 5-year-old could have caught. He needed a lesson in concentration, so I gave him one." The admission hit me like a physical blow. "You put your hands on my son?" I asked, barely a whisper. "Yeah, I did," And I'll do it again if he doesn't toughen up. That's my job. I make champions. He finished with the part that crushed me most. What are you going to do about it, Riley? You're a nobody. Complain to the league. My brother-in-law runs it. Complain to the parents. They only care about winning. I'm a winner. Then he hung up. I sat in the silence with the mocking dial tone in my ear. He'd admitted the assault and celebrated it. He'd spelled out the fortress of power around him. Family ties in the league. Parents willing to look the other way for a chance at glory. He was right. I was just a single dad, a mechanic, with no influence. Any formal complaint would be buried. The other parents, hungry for championships, would ignore it. My hope collapsed into a hard, impotent rage. Then his last words, "You're a nobody," began to shift. Yes, I was one man. He could handle one angry parent, but could he handle 20? A cold, focused idea formed from the ashes of my anger. I picked up my phone again, not to call the coach this time, but to scroll through the long alphabetized list of all the other parents on the team. He had built his small kingdom of control by keeping us isolated, each parent too afraid to speak up, each of us convinced we were alone. But that night, he was about to learn what happens when the so-called nobodies stand together. I sat in my dim living room, the glow from my phone lighting up a list of names, the Hornets baseball team's parent roster. It was a list I had barely paid attention to before, just a group of parents connected through our son's love of the game. But tonight, I was determined to turn that list into something stronger, a united front. My hand trembled as I made the first call, my heart pounding in my chest. What was I doing? Coach Evans had been right. Most of these parents adored him. They'd likely see me as an overreacting father of a soft kid. Maybe they'd even warn him after hanging up on me. Still, I pressed call. The first name was Bill, father of the team's star pitcher. He answered on the second ring, his voice loud and confident. "Hello? Hi, Bill," I said, trying to steady my voice. "This is Tom Riley, Jake Sepp's dad." "Oh, hey, Tom," he replied, tone suddenly cautious. "Everything okay?" I took a deep breath and told him everything about Jake's black eye, the incident in the dugout, and the coach's arrogant confession on the phone. When I finished, silence filled the line, long and cold. "Wow," he finally said. "That Sepp's quite an accusation, Tom." "It sets not an accusation," I replied firmly. "It sets the truth. The man assaulted my son." Another long pause. Then Bill sighed. "Look, Tom," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "Evans is tough, but he wins. My kid Sip's getting scouted by travel teams because of him. I Sip sorry about what happened to Jake, but I Sip not risking my son Sip's future over a little rough coaching. I can get involved." And with that, he hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling a wave of despair. Evans had been right again. They didn't care. They were blinded by ambition, willing to overlook my son's pain for a shot at their own children's success. I almost gave up right then. But when I glanced at the closed door of Jake's room and imagined his bruised, sleeping face, I knew I couldn't stop. I kept dialing, one number after another. Every call brought the same polite refusal. "I said, I'm sorry, but we can get involved. That Sepp's just how Coach Evans is. My son says yours is too sensitive." Each rejection drained a little more hope from me, leaving behind only isolation and anger. Near midnight, I reached the last name, Sarah. She was a single mom like me, and her son Ben was the team's catcher. I expected another polite brush-off. She answered, her voice soft and weary. I told her the story again, this time flat and emotionless, repeating the same words I'd said a dozen times before. But the silence on the other end wasn't cold. It was quiet, listening. When I finished, I heard a sound that surprised me, a small broken sob. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew something was wrong." She told me her own story. Ben had been coming home from practice sick to his stomach for weeks. On game days, he'd throw up in the morning. His passion for baseball, once his greatest joy, had vanished. He never said why. Then, in a trembling voice, she added, "Last week he came home with a bruise shaped like a man's hand. He said he ran into a fence. I believed him because I wanted to." And just like that, a crack appeared in the coach's wall of power. "I guess we set not alone anymore," I said. "What do we do, Thomas?" she asked, her voice now stronger, steadier. "We keep calling," I replied, a fragile hope flickering inside me. And we did. For the next hour, Sarah and I worked together. We called the other parents again, this time as a team. It wasn't just one angry father anymore. It was two parents sharing stories that formed a pattern. One by one, the truth began to surface. The shortstop's mom admitted that Evans had called her son a pathetic excuse for a boy in front of everyone. The outfielder's father confessed his son had been benched an entire season for missing one practice to attend a family funeral. Story after story came out, each one stripping away another layer of fear. By 2 a.m., we had a plan. Quiet, simple, but powerful. The next afternoon, the sun was bright and the sky clear. A perfect day for baseball. As Jake and I drove to the field, I felt calm. The rage from the night before was gone, replaced by purpose. Jake sat quietly beside me, his bruised face a silent reminder of what we were standing against. "Dad, maybe we shouldn't Set do this," he murmured. "He Set's going to be mad." "I know, buddy," I said, meeting his eyes. "But there's Sep's a difference between being mad and being in charge. And today," I added with a steady smile, "he Sep's not in charge. We are. You with me." He looked at me, nodded slowly, and I saw a spark of courage return to his eyes. We arrived first. Evans stood on the pitcher's mound, arms crossed, smug as ever. When he saw us walking toward him, he smirked. "Well, Riley," he called out, "here to cry again? Or did your kid come to apologize for being soft?" I said nothing. I just stood there beside Jake and waited. Then a car pulled into the lot. A mother and son stepped out. Then another car, and another. Soon, they kept coming, one after another. The smirk faded from Evan's face, replaced by confusion. One by one, the parents of the Hornets, the very people he had bullied, insulted, and controlled for years, walked onto the field with their children. No one shouted. No one spoke. They simply formed a wide, silent circle around the mound. Evans looked around, meeting 20 calm but furious faces. He looked at me, and in that moment, he understood. The fortress he had built, one made of fear and silence, had fallen. He was no longer the powerful coach on his throne. He was just a man, a bully, standing alone on a baseball field, surrounded and outnumbered. He looked at me at last, his eyes filled with quiet desperation, a question he couldn't voice. He thought I was the leader. He was mistaken. I wasn't leading this. I was merely the spark. The fire that was about to engulf him was one he had ignited himself. I stepped forward from the circle, not as a leader, but as a simple representative. "Coach Evans," I began, my tone calm but resonant, carrying across the sunlit field with the weight of judgment. "Yesterday, you told me over the phone that I was a nobody, and you were right. I am. I Sep just a mechanic, a single father doing his best." I gestured toward the circle of silent, resolute parents around us. "But we," I continued, my voice rising with conviction, "we are not nobodies. We are the parents, the ones who pay the league fees, buy the uniforms, drive our sons to practice through the rain and the heat. We are the ones who trust you with the most precious part of our lives. And you," I said, my voice now sharp and final, "you broke that trust." He tried to interrupt, stumbling over his words. "Now, hold on," he said. attempting to regain his old tone of authority. This is just a misunderstanding. The kid, your kid, he seps just soft. You were only what, coach? A voice cut in, clear and unflinching. It was Sarah, the single mother of our catcher, Ben. She stepped forward beside me, fierce and protective. Were you just toughening my son when you called him a pathetic, useless waste of a uniform in front of the whole team, just because he dropped one pitch? Then another parent stepped up. Were you teaching discipline when you made my son run laps in 90-degree heat until he threw up because he was 5 minutes late from a Dr. Sepp's visit? Were you teaching respect when you refused to let my son attend his grandmother Sepp's funeral and then benched him for the rest of the season? One by one, the stories poured out, years of quiet humiliation, fear, and misplaced loyalty to a winning record. Now those buried truths rose together in one powerful voice that could no longer be ignored. Coach Evans stood frozen, his face pale with disbelief, as the small empire he had built on intimidation began to crumble. I stepped closer, my words deliberate. Coach, the entire team is quitting effective immediately. I nodded to Sarah. She handed him a thick white envelope. And this, I said evenly, is a formal, legally binding complaint to the National Youth Baseball League, signed by every parent standing here. It includes over a dozen notarized affidavits from our sons, describing your repeated verbal and physical abuse. He took the envelope, his hands shaking. I watched as the realization hit him. This was not just the end of his team, it was the end of his career, his reputation, his identity. He dropped to his knees on that bright field, a man undone, surrounded by the quiet, unyielding power of those he once dismissed as nobodies. We didn't stay to witness his collapse. Our work was finished. One by one, we turned away, took our son's hands, and walked off the field, leaving him alone in the center of the diamond. A king with no crown, no subjects, no kingdom. The aftermath was swift. The league, faced with a unified complaint, launched a full investigation. Coach Evans was suspended, and after confirming the allegations, permanently banned from coaching again. His reign was over. But our story didn't end with his downfall. It began anew. A week later, I sat in a local pizza shop with Sarah, the mother who had stood beside me that day. We weren't celebrating. We were planning. Our boys, Jake and Ben, and all their teammates were heartbroken. Their team was gone. Their love for baseball was fading under the shadow of one man's cruelty. We can let him take the game from them too, Sarah said firmly. We have to do something. So we did. The 20 parents who had once shared a late-night call of frustration came together again. We gathered in the high school gym and made a decision. We would not let our sons be scattered. We would give them a new start. We created our own independent baseball team. No sponsors, no official league backing, just a shared purpose. The community rallied. The parents, who were accountants, lawyers, and designers, all helped, drafting paperwork, fundraising, creating a logo. We called ourselves the Rebels. When it came time to choose a coach, I looked around the room. There were others far more experienced. But then, Sarah stood up. I think, she said, with a proud smile, we already have our coach. Every parent turned to me. That's how my life took an unexpected yet deeply fulfilling turn. A year later, I stood once again on that same baseball field. But now, it wasn't a place of pain. It was a place of joy. The air was filled with laughter, the sound of bats cracking, and the pure energy of kids who loved the game again. I wasn't a mechanic today. I was a coach, their coach. My son Jake was on the pitcher's mound. The timid, uncertain boy from a year ago was gone. In his place stood a confident, joyful young man who loved every moment of this game. He wound up, threw, and the ball cut straight down the middle for a perfect strike. I looked at the parents in the stands. my friends, my partners, my community, and thought of that phone call a year ago when Coach Evans had sneered. "What are you going to do about it, Riley? You set or a nobody?" He had been right. I was a nobody, but I learned the most valuable lesson of my life, that when nobodies stand together, they can become a force strong enough to tear down kingdoms and build something better in their place. My revenge wasn't in his ruin. It was in this, the act of rebuilding something good, something just, something ours. A powerful story about how ordinary people can unite to confront injustice and reclaim their dignity. What do you think about how these parents stood together? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you cheered for this community's victory, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of justice and redemption, and click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.